Good afternoon. It's December 4th, 2018. We're here today with Crag Chivers. I'm Deb Lowrance for the Peabody Public Library Oral History Project. And Mr. Chivers was a member of the Marine Corps and the United States Air National Guard.
Correct.
Well, first off, thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Now, just tell us about your service. Tell us where you were.
Okay. I'll begin by saying I finished high school. I was 17 when I joined the Marine Corps. I grew up in northeastern Pennsylvania in the mountains, so Marines on the East Coast go to Parris Island. So I went through Parris Island, South Carolina for basic training. I was 13 weeks down there. And then from there I went through advanced infantry training at Camp Geiger, which is near Camp Lejeune in North Carolina. And then from there, I ended up at Camp Lejeune in the 10th Marines, which is an artillery outfit. And there was about 20 of us that get off the bus. We're brand spanking new guys. And
10 feet tall and bulletproof.
We had, we're a little angry. We're not sure what's going on because we're the new guys. And this gunnery sergeant comes up and introduces himself. His name was Luckenbach. He was from Texas.
Imagine that.
Yeah, exactly. And he was a former Marine drill instructor. Well, anyway, the first thing he asked us, and he had that Texas drawl, he says, "How many of you finished high school?" And so about 5 or 6 of us raised our hands. And anyway, he saw my name stamp, Chivers, and it was just, they're just inked on your jacket. And he walked up and looks at me and says, "Chivers?" I said, "Yes, Gunny." He said, "You know, are you any relation to Governor Chivers of Texas?" And I said, "No, Gunny, but I wish I was." So then he proceeded to ask us what we would like to do. And, like all young guys, weren't like, I said, "Well, what do you do?" And he said, "Well, my team calls in gunfire." And I said, "Well, I think I would like to do that." So I spent the rest of my time at Camp Lejeune attached to his team. The Cuban Missile Crisis broke out in 1962 in October, and we deployed down off the coast of Cuba, standing by as a blockade to the Russian trawlers and standing by to be boarding parties on the trawlers if necessary.
Wow.
And anyway, President John Kennedy did the right thing, and they backed off. And they realized that this fight wouldn't be worth the while. So we came back from there and went down to an island off of Puerto Rico called Vieques for amphibious exercises. Got back from there, and I'm standing there in formation, 7 o'clock in the morning, 7 a.m. And gunnery sergeant says, "I need one volunteer to go to Hawaii." And I did an eyes right and an eyes left, and I raised my hand.
Yeah.
And the gunny said, "Chivers, you sure you want to do this?" And I said, "Yes, I do." So then I went home on leave, and then went to Camp Pendleton in what they call a staging battalion. That's nothing more than a battalion waiting for Marines to gather together to be deployed to Hawaii. So after about 30 days, finally we sailed on the USS Billy Mitchell to Pearl Harbor, and it's a 5-day sail.
Ooh.
And then it was on a Sunday, a beautiful sunny day like Hawaii always is. I don't know whether people know this, but there's no word for weather in the Hawaiian language.
Really?
Because it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Then there's no need.
Okay.
So anyway, having said that, we got on buses and went to the other side of the, what they call the windward side of the island. And that is the Kaneohe Marine Corps Air Station. It is a combined air-ground team. We had every fighting component that you need, an infantry regiment, a tank, but artillery, and right across from us was an airstrip with Marine fighters, and we also had a helicopter squadron. So when we deployed, we had all the assets you would need to fight and win.
Wow.
Quite that simple. We could do a beach assault, be protected by fighter aircraft, and also be deployed by helicopter.
Mm-hmm.
So we did a lot of training. Little did we realize, about 2 years later, we were on our way to South Vietnam. But between those 2 years, we did a lot of guerrilla warfare training. We went to prisoner of war school. As young guys, did we realize what we might face. Our instructors in the guerrilla warfare school were older Marines sent to Indonesia and trained by the British, and they came back and trained us. And then we deployed to other islands, doing a lot of what we call counterinsurgency guerrilla warfare activity. Mm-hmm. The Big Island we went on. We'd go up. We spent 2 weeks up there. The island of Molokai, the island of Kauai. So we were going to. It was quite exciting for a young guy because you're seeing a lot of territory, and you're getting to see all kinds of people that you would never ever see back home. And so then after that, it was 1965. We were supposed to be aggressors against the 1st Marine Division at Camp Pendleton in California. And we were going to sail out of Pearl Harbor and under the 5-day sail and do an amphibious assault against the 1st Marine Division called Operation Silver Lance. So we were at Pearl Harbor on ships for 2 weeks. We could get off at night and go in town and so forth. But so we sailed after 2 weeks out at dusk. And the next morning when we woke up, we looked out and said, you know what? The sun is not in the right spot.
Uh-oh.
So for 10 days, we steamed to the island of Okinawa. Mm-hmm. And it was January, and the weather was wonderful in Hawaii, and this was just not, it was cold. And anyway, so we spent 3 months in Okinawa, up in what we call the Northern Training Area. It's jungle training, quite simply put. And then we deployed out of, it's a bay called White Bay, and sailed to South Vietnam, and we made a beach assault below on a peninsula called the Chulai Peninsula. It was about 50 miles south of the big air base, Da Nang. And we moved inland, and you know, at first it was probably like 8 or 10 miles of sand.
Oh.
And we really weren't sure. They said we weren't sure where we were. And we thought maybe we were in the Middle East for a brief.
Well, that by sand, yeah, that would make sense.
And then they find, well, this is South Vietnam, and we were deployed among some villages and then up in the hills. The mission for us was to secure that whole peninsula so they could put an airstrip in. And this is very early in the Vietnam War, and so they could, you know, provide fighters to bomb and strafe up north into North Vietnam. So basically, we deployed out around the hills, running patrols and keeping the air base secure on all sides. It was right off the coast, so it was about maybe 8 or 10 miles off the South China Sea. And that was pretty much it for me. After that, I went back to Hawaii and was discharged.
So you said all this training, I heard you say POW, they taught you how to be?
I will explain that. I'm glad you asked that. There is a big army base on the west side of the island of Oahu, Schofield Army Barracks. And we used their ranges frequently because we were right on the water, the Kaneohe, and they had a lot more land for us to practice with. Anyway, they didn't tell us where we got on in trucks. We went up through a mountain into the back end of Schofield Army Barracks. We got out of the trucks, and they had U.S. Army Asians, Filipinos, Japanese, Chinese soldiers dressed as Koreans.
Oh.
And the moment we got off the trucks, this staff sergeant, Army staff sergeant said, "As of this moment, you're all prisoners of war." Well, you know, Marines, they're taught, don't stick around, so we all started scattering. And that's when they said, "Hey, you know, you can't do that. It was in And so then they lined us up and really shoving us around, knocking us down, making us get on our knees, and asking us all kind of questions. And we were told, we were always instructed, Uniform Code of Military Justice, name, rank, and serial number. That's all you ever gave them. We're supposed to give them. And that didn't work with everyone, because some folks can't handle stress as much as others, and some of them started giving, and interesting enough, our executive officer was one of them, a West Point grad. He was right next to me on my left, and he started telling them, we were just amazed. But anyway,
wow.
They had sweat boxes they'd put us in, and this training was to make you understand how to cope, how to be evasive, to think about your surroundings, like you're obviously, and it was so real that you actually were frightened.
Yeah.
It was that real. And the thing about it was, they wanted us to understand, hey, if this really happens to you, first thing you want to do is you want to look at your terrain. What chance could you have of getting away as soon as you can? Because the point is, when you're a prisoner, you want to get away as quickly as possible. The longer you are a prisoner, the less strong you get, weaker, hungry, thirsty, tired, et cetera, et cetera. So the point is, you want to be able to mentally figure out, how can I survive this? That's what they want you to do. Not that it'll happen to you, but if it does, these are the things you need to be aware of. Number one, your terrain. Are you, a group of you, are you strong enough to maybe several or 8, 10 of you get away at the same time? Is it worth trying to overpower a guard or guards? Those kind of things. The one example they showed us, this is a true story, it was in a North Korean POW camp during the Korean War, and a bunch of American GIs pretended that they were surveying the road out of the camp with sticks.
Oh.
And this actually happened. One guy would walk ahead and go left or right, and the guy would pound a stake in, and they kept doing this till they got to the gate. And the North Koreans opened the gate.
Wow.
And they kept this up while they were being watched, but pretty soon there was a bend where the line of sight between the gate and that bend you couldn't see, and
and they're all gone.
And that's yeah. I will say the 3 instructors, Army instructors, were all Korean War vets. All 3 of them spent 36 months in a North Korean prisoner of war camp. So their knowledge base was incredible for young guys like us. You know, it was really amazing. It was you know what? These were like insurance policies.
Yeah, sure.
The prisoner of war school and the guerrilla warfare school, both. If you paid any attention at all, it would serve you well. So
did you see combat?
Yes, in South Vietnam, we were attached to the 4th Marine Regiment, and myself and that gunnery sergeant, we was a team of 4 of us, were attached to a 4th Marine Regiment infantry company. So we deployed with them up in the hills, and the first hill we were on is, I'll never forget the number, 69. We oversaw the South China Sea. We were high enough where we could watch the South China Sea, and we had, and this was not the good news, we had a South Vietnamese infantry company we were attached to. So there was actually 13 of us. There was our team, and there were 13 Marines altogether. We had a 105 howitzer up on that hill. We had 2 mortars, 2 M60 machine guns. All of us had automatic weapons. All sides of that hill we had claymore mines, which you point them towards the enemy. So if they run at you, you blow those. And we only got in by helicopter. You didn't drive up in a Jeep or a truck or, you know, and say, hey, we got hot food for you today. It was none of that. So we went in and out of there by chopper, and we did a lot of patrols out. Once we left that base, you know, we would cover different grids, and we always had artillery that we could call in, or choppers. So we were around a lot of young villages. I brought a disc with me, but anyway, it's probably counterproductive. But I learned that it was important to stay close in the villages, to stay close to the children. And the reason is, children play and they see everything. And if they trust you, they'll help you. So if kids are playing out, and the enemy with us was the Viet Cong, it was not the North Vietnamese.
Right,
early on in the onset of the war, it was all, you wouldn't know who they were. They were all, the villagers, at night they could be Viet Cong, at day they could be in a village, or they could be out gathering wood for fires. I mean, you just didn't know. So that was always the unknown for you. But my point is, with these kids, if they trusted you, they would tell you.
Wow.
But it took a while. This just didn't happen like over time. But, and so we became very protective of those villages. You know, when we weren't there, before we got there, the Viet Cong would come in, demand their rice caches, you know, they would tax them. They would do all kind of things that would basically strip a village of the ability to thrive. And if that didn't happen, they would use a village elder and put them on their knees and execute them in front of the villagers. So that was their selling point. Compliance is another word. But so having said that, it was a tough time, and you know, it's actually, those people are still in my heart.
Well, sure,
You know,
sure. So while you were over there, obviously you were young. You weren't married yet?
No, I was not married. I thank God. That was a good thing.
Yeah.
But I also must say that when we landed there, the Vietnamese thought we were French. That was a French colony.
Oh.
And they hated us till they realized we were Marines. I mean, Americans. And so things got a little better for us. But that French colony, way back in the 50s, the French Foreign Legion got slaughtered in a valley called DMB in Phu back in the 50s. And what happened was, these French paratroopers and French Foreign Legion were in this valley, and the Viet Cong, which before they became Viet Cong, they had another name called Viet Minh, M-I-N-H. They took a bunch of artillery pieces, broke them down, disassembled them, that valley was surrounded by mountains. These Viet Minh roped those howitzers up with ropes, reassemble them, and point French paratroopers. And it was
They had
that bad.
chance.
Yeah, exactly. This is a little bit of history. Back then, President Eisenhower was president in the U.S., and the French wanted our assistance. We did not give it to them at the time. And, you know, I think that over time, the French, we kind of there was a bad feeling towards us. But that was, you know, I was a young guy then, way before my Marine Corps time, so. Because of what I did over there, I got to see a lot of the Vietnam, both on a chopper and just relocating different spots. So it's a beautiful country. When we landed there, we're thinking, why are we here? Because we had spent so much time in Hawaii, we thought, boy, if we could have just brought our surfboards.
Oh, wow. Well, I think some guys did, actually, or got them somehow.
Yeah.
But, so with amenities and stuff, I mean, I'm sure you didn't think there were amenities at that point, but how, you weren't married, but your mom and dad were at home.
Oh, yeah.
How did you communicate with them?
You know, we sent letters, you know, and, you know, nothing stamped, you know, they process it out, you know. I know, you know, we're so busy as young guys. You know, you're overwhelmed with everything. I mean, it's so different from peacetime, if you will. You know, being back at the garrison. You know, and yeah, we would send letters home. I actually, when I was in Hawaii myself, 5 of us took the University of Hawaii entrance exam, and myself and that gunnery sergeant from Texas, he and I were the only one that passed it. So he and I were taking some classes on the base.
For real?
And when we deployed, I took a college algebra course with me out in the field, and I never ended up finishing it because it just didn't work out. But yeah, we
high hopes.
Yeah.
So what was your food like?
You know, a lot of times we would what they call sea rations out of a can. Our favorite thing was peaches and pears in the cans. Really? One thing, when we landed and went inland, the Navy Seabees, Mobile Construction Battalion, came in, and we're up in the hills and they're down on the South China Sea, and they're living quite well. And so this gunnery sergeant asked 4 of us to go down there and see what we could scrounge up. That's a kind word to put it. Okay. So there are these huge, big pallets of food. And so 2 of us, and they had MPs walking on top of them, armed. And it was probably more so also that, you know, it wasn't just the Marines, but just the natives, you know. But anyway, 2 of us started a tussle, and the MPs came running, and the other 2 guys, we pulled off 4 cases of fruit, loaded them on a chopper, took them back up in the hills, and of course we're the good guys then, but we had one first lieutenant that came up and said, "You're going to take those back, and I'm going to do everything in my power to give you office hours or a summary court-martial." And anyway, that gunnery sergeant said, "Lieutenant, I need to talk to you." And he, you know, we really didn't hear exactly what was going on, but the gist of it was that, look, these guys look out for everybody. Now, you might not like what they do, but their interest is all of us, not just themselves. That's why they did this, because this stuff's going to go out to all of us, and we never know what we might get when we're running low on stuff. So, having said that, and he backed off. So,
I know it's very tropical there. I mean, were you
Yeah,
there during the summer or?
It was hot and humid. At first, when we were moving towards the hills, we actually bathed in a river. And some of us, it was 360, guys on one side, guys on the other, weapons pointed outboard.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, for a while, there was times you just didn't get, it wasn't like, hey, you're going to get a shower every day, stuff like that. There was times when you're hot, filthy, dirty, hungry, tired, and scared. So
say your boots got a hole in them or your socks got a hole in them. How easy was it to get a replacement for that?
Cash those out. You could, we wouldn't have to go down by the South China Sea because they had a lot of contract ships come in, run by, they were American contracts, but a lot of Koreans from South Korea, sailors. They were really civilians, but they were contracted out, and they would bring in supplies and whatever was needed. And then, of course, they're pushing it out towards where we are in the forward areas. But that was not an issue for, I cannot speak as the war progressed, but for us, that wasn't a problem. But a lot of rain. It's just going through rice paddies and the Vietnamese, the sanitary conditions were not that great. In the villages, they would go out behind their huts and eliminate themselves.
Oh, wow.
And so,
not modern cities
no,
like you see now.
Kids today are spoiled here. They have no idea. I don't think they appreciate our country. They have no idea what, not just us, but men and women before us, both the Korean War, World War II, First World War, etc. It was something else.
So, here's the big one. When you came home.
When I came home, we were treated so badly. Laughed at, belittled, called all kind of names. Like one guy said, "You're not one of those chumps that." That kind of thing. My parents didn't even recognize me when I got off the plane in Pennsylvania. They were waiting at the airport, and they didn't even recognize me.
Wow.
So, we didn't, and I'm speaking for when I came through, and at times it was even worse, probably, because that war lasted about 10 years, And I will say this, when I was going to IU Purdue, and we had a vet club, Vietnam vet service club, and so there was a lot of different, the Air Force, Navy, Army, but we had that common bond. I haven't been in the military, but some of the profs, they just, we didn't get that respect. It was almost like we were a burden, and it really makes you quite resentful. I will say this, I had one professor that asked me to give a talk, and I did, and that was appreciated. My fourth year was an internship at Parkview, because I was in the laboratory, and it was an amazing thing for me. The doctors all wanted to, hey, there's a Marine down there in the laboratory, it's just back from Vietnam. And these docs would come up, and it was quite a good feeling, I gotta tell you. They just wanted to know, one of the things they wanted to know is, why are you here and not drugged out like we see on TV? So there was that, the CBS, NBC, ABC, they gave the public the impression that every GI or Marine or whatever that was in Vietnam apparently was hooked on heroin or smoking marijuana, and I cannot speak to that.
False propaganda.
Yeah, exactly. fake news.
Yeah.
Excuse me. But I had to explain myself to these docs because I was amazed at how many docs would come down to lab from Parkview to talk to me. And I told them, I said, well, I have to explain it from my side. I said, when we went to Vietnam, we went as a unit. Everybody knew everybody. And I said, I wasn't a replacement guy that came from the States and, you know, one day I'm out of basic training, the next day I'm on an aircraft to South Vietnam and stuck in a unit that nobody knows me and nobody wants to know me. And I said, so that part of it, for us, we all knew each other and, you know, we knew what we had to do. I mean, so it was a brotherhood. That the best way I can explain it was a brotherhood.
Sure, and that's great.
Yeah.
That's
yes,
great.
Yeah.
So you eventually left the Marine Corps.
I did.
You took a little break, and you went back to.
After, you mean back into the Air Guard? Okay, I'm glad you asked. My degree's in laboratory medicine. I ended up working at the VA. I started my career at the Marion VA, and that VA is a neuropsych unit and medical. So my time there, I ran across a lot of World War I vets. Some of them were gassed in the trenches. I met World War II vets and Korean vets, and one Marine that was a patient there had been on the island of Corregidor, or Bataan, and I asked him, I said, I always struck up a conversation to get him relaxed, and I asked him, I said, did you ever see General MacArthur? And he laughed, he said, yeah. I was laying on a stretcher when he jumped over me to get on that PT boat to get to Australia.
Oh, for goodness sake.
That was quite interesting.
Yeah.
So, you know, but so then I spent my career in the VA, both there in Fort Wayne, and I transferred out to Pennsylvania where I grew up, and back to Marion, then back to back to Fort Wayne. And I ended up over both the Marion and Fort Wayne laboratories my last 5 years. But during that interim, at the tender age of 42, I just wanted to, I didn't know if I could get back in. And another older Marine who was a pharmaceutical rep was at the VA, and I knew him quite well. And I said, hey, I knew he was in the Air Guard. Excuse me, and I said, do you have any openings over there? And I don't want to walk fence line with the rifle. I'll back up a little bit because I had a brief coughing spell there. Anyway, I asked this guy that was in the Air Guard, this former Marine, I said, do you have any openings? And I don't want to be walking a fence line with a rifle. And he said, we need a guy like you in the medical squadron to do all the air crew workups in the lab. So I went out there, and this old crusty Air Force chief, Air Guard chief, said, well, I don't really know if we want you. And I said, look, let me tell you about me. I said, all I need is a yes or no. I said, you know, I'm a Vietnam vet, I was a Marine, I was a trigger puller. And unlike you, and I shouldn't have said it, but I said, I don't have a coffee finger. And he cussed me out and said, okay, you're in. So I signed up for 1 year. I signed up in March. In May, we went to England, and for 15 days. And it was just an incredible experience.
Yeah.
And while I was there, I'm in this Air Force lab, and there's some young American fighter pilots talking to themselves, pointing at me. And I had the same color hair then as I do now. And I overheard one of them said, why don't you go up and ask him? And so one of these young fighter pilots, A-10 fighter pilots, comes up and he calls me sir and said, "Sir, we all have a question for you." And I said, "Sure, go ahead." And I said, "It's something I'm doing about drawing blood." I said, "No problem there." He said, "Oh, no. With your hair color, what did you do wrong for the low rank you have?"
Oh, dear. Oh.
And, I laughed. But anyway, it was a Royal Air Force base, and the middle weekend, we got to go to, myself and another, the same guy that, the former Marine, and I went to Holland, to Amsterdam, and the rest of that weekend, we got to tour some World War II battlefield, not battlefields, but cemeteries.
Oh, wow.
So it was quite interesting. But I did actually did quite a few deployments and ended up supposed to go to Gulf War I when President George H.W. Bush was in, and we were the next medical unit to be deployed, and there was a lot of anxiety because we expected to be exposed to a lot of, because there was a lot of tanks involved, both the Iraqis and Americans, that I went over to the St. Joe Hospital burn unit and requested to have a burn expert give us classes on burns. And yeah, we had a male RN come out to the Air Guard and did quite a presentation on burns and how to deal with them. So anyway, but the war only lasted a few days, and we never got to go, but we were the next unit up to go. So a bit of excitement.
Yeah, yeah.
But then I did some other deployments. I went and did one to South Korea. Actually, we even did one to the Virgin Islands, and because we were training a Virgin Island Army unit, and we spent a week down there, and they treated us wonderfully. They gave us a Virgin Island dinner when we arrived.
Wow!
And we deployed to 2 islands. So I was on St. Croix the whole time, and some of us split off to St. Thomas. And we were just doing a lot of stuff for Virgin Islanders. And I was helping the optometrist with eye screenings. And I was struck by how these old women, how well they could see.
Really?
And so I kind of made a game of it. I said, you know what, if you could read one more line for me, you're going to turn into a young lady. And they just all did, I mean, they just loved it.
Yeah.
So we had one of their army, a female captain. Everywhere I went, she went. And my last spot where we were working, she came up to me and she said, I've been watching you. I said, yes, I know you've been watching me. Every site I'm at, you're at. And she says, well, I got to tell you something. These people love you. she said, you take the edge off and you do things with them that makes them feel good, and even though you're doing something medically. So, I thanked her, and
that's pretty neat.
It was.
Pretty neat.
So then we did another deployment to an air base in Lakenheath in England, and I worked in the lab there, and the lab officer asked if I would take a look at some instruments, and because he knew my background, and he said, we've been having a lot of problems with this. It's costing us thousands of dollars. Would you mind looking at it? I said, yeah, sure. That's my job. So I did, and I had another guy help me, and we took it apart and put some parts in it and so forth and so on. And there was one active duty Air Force lab guy who the first day said, I don't want you people near this. And I said, well, the colonel asked us to look at it. He said, I don't care, I don't want you touching anything. Well, it didn't matter. When he walked away, we
Well,
took it
sure.
apart and did what we were supposed to. And the colonel came up and said, Sergeant Chivers, he said, I don't know what to tell you. He said, you saved us thousands of dollars, because they were doing blood alcohols on young airmen that were out and drinking in pubs, and
Sure.
it was costing them a fortune. And he said, now we can do them here. And so he said, I don't know how to repay you. I said, you don't repay it, man. You just, that's what I do for a living. I'm good at it. And so anyway, he took myself and the other guy out to his house for dinner. He was the only American in an English village. Across the street was a Norman church, like 900 years old.
Ooh.
And then the next day he took us down to, it's a big, it's like an aircraft shelter, but inside it was all of the blood for European forces frozen.
Whoa.
If war broke out in Europe, if the Russians started something, and all this blood was frozen in these big freezers, and he wanted to. He just wanted us to understand what was going on, and it was really quite an experience.
Oh, I'll bet.
Yeah. So.
I'll bet. So then you stayed with the Air Guard for?
Till I was 60, and then it's mandatory, you have to get out. And our colonel said, Chivers, I'm going to keep you. And I said, you know what, sir? If you can keep me, I'll stay.
Yeah.
But I said, I know this is not going to happen. It's just mandatory.
Mm-hmm. So the guys that you fought with in Vietnam and the people that
yes, I'm glad you asked. Last March, 4 of us got together down in Florida. There's two of the old gunnery sergeant.
Uh-huh.
He retired out. He got a combat commission, and he retired out as a captain. Another guy played baseball with the Pittsburgh Pirates, and I mean, he got injured playing baseball, but he was a Marine. And then another one out of Washington State. I was the youngest guy. These guys all had like 5-6 years on me, and but we got together in Florida. The guy from state of Washington, he lives in Snohomish, Washington, in the Cascades. He flew in with his wife, and we got the other 2 guys. So after over 50 years, we got together. And my old company commander, he since passed away, but I found him in the Leatherneck magazine. It's been just 20 years past, and I called him, and his wife answers, and I said, I'll tell you who I am, ma'am. I said, your husband probably will never remember me, and I told her, and she said, give me your phone number. He's not here right now, but I will have him call you. And he did.
Cool.
And I was boxed on the Hawaiian Marine boxing team when we were in Hawaii. And our commander was one of these guys who, if you did sports, and he just, it was kind of like his thing. I mean, and the 4 of us were on the base boxing team, which is unusual for 4 guys in the same unit. Be on the base boxing team. Well, anyway, he said, yeah, I remember you. You were a boxer.
Wow.
He remembered me. So anyway, we excuse me. There were some other guys that I ran into. Somehow I have this knack for finding guys in my outfit.
Oh, but that's neat.
And when we did a deployment during the Gulf War to Mississippi, and our planes went, there was only 10 of us, and our colonel went down. He said, hey, I want you to come with me because I want to learn how to shoot like a Marine. And I told him, I said, there's one guy that was a Marine rifle instructor. I said, I will make sure he gets with you so that, you know, you will learn it the way you should learn it. And so, but anyway, so we went down to the Gulf and Biloxi, Mississippi, and there was a guy in my outfit from Vietnam, that was Hawaii and Vietnam, and I got a hold of him. And he's a IRS agent at the time, but so we got together, and so I do find these guys, and we all stay in contact.
That's very nice.
You know, it's just the way it is.
Yeah, yeah. Well, this is a marvelous interview. Is there anything else you'd like to let us know?
The only thing I want to say is God bless our great country. There's no other like it on this planet. I've been other places. I've been to the Soviet Union. I've been to Finland. And I can tell you, having been to the Soviet Union for 2 weeks, the contrast is unbelievable. And I got to tell you, when I was there, we took a Fort Wayne hockey team out there.
Oh.
And our kids, we played in Moscow, and then also St. Petersburg, outside of the city, about 20 miles. And I had a TV camera, and they had a policeman kind of shadowing me. You know, it's like wherever I was, he was. Well, I ditched this guy, and I'm inside this complex getting a cup of tea, and I hear this psst, psst, and across the hall is the Soviet team. They're all young guys, kids, like our team. And the one kid's waving to me to come over. And I go over there with my camera inside that locker room where all the team that our kids were playing, and this kid bolts the door shut behind me. And I have about 10 or 15 kids all talking to me at once. And I said, English, you speak English? They said, yes, we speak English. And the one kid pulled out a great big hammer and sickle flag out of his hockey gear. And he says, trade, you understand trade? I said, yeah, I understand. I said, how much do you want for it? He said, 100 American dollars. And this is the point I want to make. I said, what would you do with 100 American dollars? He says, freedom, buy freedom. Let me explain that to you. The ruble, their money, is valueless. It's worthless. So if you give them American money, they can go into stores that only Europeans, Westerners can get into, because they have American cash to spend there.
Wow.
And so anyway, I said, I don't have $100 on me. I said, I'll give you 20. And by that time, the coach is banging on the door, and he's not happy. And this kid said, well, do you have a tape deck? I said, I mean, bless his heart. So I never got the flag. But anyway, so I'm back outside with my camera. There's about 10 or 15 young Russian guys in a half circle. And I'm taping them. And this one steps out of the crowd. He looks left and right. He takes this fur-skin hat off. He says, and he's pointing at his head shaved. He says, soldier, you understand soldier? I said, yeah, I understand you're a soldier. And he goes left and right. He says, America, we love you.
Wow.
I have it on tape.
Wow.
So anyway, then we were in Finland, and we beat the Finnish national team at hockey. That's their national sport. Like baseball.
Oh my!
Like baseball is our national sport. Hockey is theirs. Wow. You know how we have a gas station on every corner? They have an ice rink on every corner.
Oh my goodness!
In Helsinki.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah, it was really something to see. The food in Russia was terrible.
Wow.
I got a bowl of soup. I thought it was potato soup. It was fish.
Ew.
And it was, oh my gosh, it was terrible.
Yeah, ew.
And they have, when you go to a hotel, you give them your key when you leave. Like if you're going out. Somehow my wife got a key and I got a key. So I said, hey, you know what? This is not going to work. This is going to work out pretty good here. So as we left to go downtown, I gave him my key.
Mm-hmm.
The next morning, we were out there at the bus, and our tour guide, a young woman whose father was a naval admiral that was the first ship into New York Harbor, a Russian ship.
Mm-hmm.
Well, anyway, that was her dad, but she said, you know, last night, you were not in your room. And I said, you know, I don't know how to explain this to you here, but in America, I would reply, it is none of your business.
Yeah.
And I left it at that, and no one bothered me. I mean, there was no,
Mm-hmm.
you know, but.
But they knew.
That key that we turned in, they,
Yeah.
you know. Oh,
Wow.
yeah. And they love anything American. The staff there would, can you give me, if you had blue jeans, you could.
Oh, I had heard that.
Yeah,
If you got American blue jeans,
Oh,
you
yeah,
can clean
yeah.
up.
Yeah.
Wow.
We sat down with the Russian coach, hockey coach, while the kids were playing hockey, and he asked us all kind of questions. But then he said, you know, here, the government pretends to pay us, and we pretend to work.
Wow.
So, having said that, we all need to realize we are so blessed to live in the greatest capitalist country on this planet. And if you want a taste of socialism, come talk to Crag Chivers, because I'll tell you, I've been to some of those places.
And we don't want to be there.
And you don't want to go there. You may want to go there to visit, but you want to be able to leave to come back.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for your interview.
My
Thank
pleasure.
you again for your service.
It was my pleasure.
And
thank you. You have a wonderful library, by the way.
oh, thank you.
I shouldn't say this, but this is the library I always come to for books,
Good.
even though I live in Noble County.
We'll take you. It's okay.